are you guys doing tonight?
Amen.
Woo! Let's give it up for our band really quick. Woo! All right. Really quick, I just want to go into some announcements, but first, I just want to ask you guys, how's your week been? Good things, right? Bad things? No?
Yeah.
Yes, maybe?
Maybe kind of.
A little bit of both? That's all right. I want to give a quick shout out to our YouTube audience online. We love you. Wish you could be here. Thank you for tuning in. And really quick, we don't have many announcements. We got our fundraisers finished up this past weekend, so thank you if you guys can make it out to that. Camp is coming up soon. We have 2 spots left. In order to save money, we need to fill those spots. So if you're thinking about coming or have a friend who's thinking about coming, we'd love to fill those spots. We want you here. We want you to go on this trip. It's going to be awesome. We're going down to Orange Beach, Alabama, as most of you all know. We're all excited for that, right? We're very close. This year's coming to an end, and really quick, before I get into announcements, actually, if you're part of the leadership team, would you mind coming up here really quick? Please? Thank you. I know Olivia doesn't want to do it, but just so you all know, these 3 right here, we...
Ash, come on up. You said 3, and then I got...
Okay, these 4...
5.
4, 5? These 4 right here. Okay, 5 counting me, whatever.
Counting Rachel. 6. Rachel.
You ever heard of her?
Do I have to count my sister? Okay, give it up for Rachel, I guess. I'll show respect her, I guess. But in helping plan camp and your fundraisers, these people have been at it all year long. So if you just want to give a quick shout out to them, we just give them some love really quick. All right, you guys can go away. Leave. It's my turn now. Go away. Shoo. All right, and if you'd love to be a part of that, I'd love to talk with you for next year because we have some people graduating. But also, I just want to go into some quick announcements really quick. We have Wednesday night growth groups at 5:30. We have our meal. I'd love you to be a part of that. Like I say, usually, we just love for you guys to come out, and I love having a meal with you, getting to spend time with each other. And then afterwards, we have our growth groups. Ben has a growth group, and they're talking about like they do a little devotion, a little more in-depth study. Mine is, we do a small devotion and then play basketball afterwards, more if you're like getting introduced to the church. It's a great way to get connected and start growing roots. Really quick before I forget too, Lainey got baptized this morning. Can we give it up for her really quick? That is awesome. So, besides all that, I just want to talk about the song that we're about to go into, Cornerstone. And we've talked about the evidence in this apologetics series all year long so far. And are you ready to accept him as your cornerstone? He's willing. He is there for all of us, all of you, me, no matter what we've done wrong. He is there for us to lean on. He is there for us to build our foundation on. Are you going to accept that this year? Are you going to accept that going into the summer? With that, just stand and worship.
Holy Spirit, on to talk to you guys for just a minute or so. We're going to talk a little bit about communion. As you guys know, it's a time we take every time during worship where we celebrate what God has done for us. We take a piece of bread, which represents his body, and a little cup of juice that represents his blood. And I think oftentimes when we go into communion, it's just our routine, it's just our habit. And when we think that God died for us, it's something that we've heard so many times that it's lost the value of hearing that someone died for you. But I think it's important to remember that Jesus didn't just die for you. He died for the chance to know you. He didn't die knowing that you were going to love him back or knowing that you would ever come towards him. He died because it gave you a shot to know him. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't certain. He died just for the chance to meet you and to have you love him and him to love you in return. So as you go into your time of communion today, I ask you just to think about that, his sacrifice that he gave for you just for that chance. And yeah, anyways, y'all can go to the stations.
Are the Gospels historically reliable? Well, before we can answer this question, we must first answer a more fundamental question. What do we mean by reliable? Now, that might seem like a simple question, but it's really not. Does it mean that in order to be reliable, there cannot be any errors whatsoever? Well, certainly that can't be the case, because if it were, well, then nothing would be historically reliable. You know, apart from Scripture, you couldn't say anything in the Greco-Roman or any literature would be historically reliable. So how many errors would be allowed before it's not historically reliable? 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%? And what kind of errors would we allow? How many big ones? Or if you have one big one, would that be the equivalent to 10 or 15 little ones in the insignificant peripheral details? How do you answer that question? And then it's more than that. It's like when you're talking about ancient biography, the genre of ancient biography is different from modern biography. It's got the same word, biography, but they operated by some different literary conventions. They had different objectives. So whereas today in biography, a modern biographer will try to talk about psychological and cultural and societal, environmental items that led the person to develop into the kind of person they are. Whereas in antiquity, they believed that a person was born with a specific character. That character didn't develop over time. It's just, it manifested itself more over time. So you don't have this psychological thing. That's why in the Gospels, as well as other ancient biographies, they usually talk about the person's family, ancestry, and then they launch right into the person's public life, whether it be military, politics, or teacher, whatever. And that's why the Gospels don't talk about the childhood of Jesus. It's not interested in talking about the psychological development of that person. That wasn't the objective. The objective of ancient biographers was to take and paint a literary portrait of who that person was. And they would manifest or illuminate who that person was through their words and their deeds.
Good evening. Can y'all hear me? All right, thank you. All right, one. I'm done. The end. I got applause. Oh, I got a little ring in there. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Andy Pattison. Or if you're new here, I've done a few of these sessions here with you all. We've been going through this series on apologetics, which is why do we believe what we believe, and we've come to Jesus Christ, which it's great. I don't know if you can see the graphic. Is that showing up there? It's great when it works out because they hadn't seen my presentation and I hadn't seen the song list, so the fact that it was Cornerstone was very cool. Because we've come to Jesus Christ, right? We talked about creation and love and beauty and all these things about why do we believe in God in general, but it really comes down to Jesus. Because if in the end someone asks me, how did we all get here? And I get that right. But then someone asks, who do you say Jesus Christ was? And I get that wrong. And the fact that I got the first one right is really kind of pointless and irrelevant, right? Jesus Christ is the cornerstone of the Christian faith. It matters what you say about him, what he claimed. Do you buy his claims? And we started that a couple weeks ago. Last week we talked about what his claims actually were, right? He claimed to be God. Well, how do we know? How do we know what he said and what he did? Most of what we know about his claims come from the Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, which are the earliest records of Jesus' early life, ministry, death, and resurrection. Okay. Now, some important note here that I actually don't have in my slides, but I do want to mention, is it's very easy, and especially for people who haven't studied the Bible or who aren't Christian, to think of the Bible as a book. It kind of is because it's bound together in one little novel, but it really should be thought of like a library. It's a collection of books that were written by different people at different times that have been put together for convenience, right? So the 4 Gospels were written by different people during different time periods, and they shouldn't be thought of as one book. It's not like the disciples got together and said, here, you take this one, you take this one, you take this one, and we're going to tell this story, right? Each individual's person's take on history, right, as they witnessed it. So if we have to rely on the Gospels for a lot of our information, well, how do we know that we can rely on the Gospels as a reliable source of information? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Can you trust what you read or what you hear about in the Gospels in the New Testament? And there's 3 categories or 3 questions that we're really going to address tonight. One, when were the Gospels written? Right? Did so much time pass that it really discredits them? And how did the information get passed along before it was actually written down? And third, is the source itself trustworthy? Can you believe it if it was accurately represented? Starting with, when were the Gospels actually written? Now, one assumption here that I'm going to kind of address in this area is the Gospels were written centuries after Jesus was alive. Right? Far too long to be reliable. This is actually one that you hear and read about quite a bit. Maybe it was written 100 years after, or hundreds of years after. I think I was able even to find one that the gospel was written a millennia after, right? Or they were written just by followers sometime down the road who needed some justification for the stories that they were telling, right? Well, that's actually not accurate at all. The Gospels are actually written within, say, 30 years, starting about 30 years or so, after the death and resurrection of Jesus. This is a relatively short time frame. If you think about it, now they are still making videos and movies and stories and books about World War II, which happened about 80 years ago, right? Ended in 1945. But we don't question the authenticity, I said that word wrong. We don't question how accurate stories about World War II are, right? Because it happened 80 years ago. Well, some of these stories, or some of these books were written, the Gospels, within 30 years of the death and resurrection of Jesus, all right? Another thing is the copies. Some of these you might recognize: Caesar, Plato. I can't pronounce a few of the other ones: Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, right? These are things that are taught and we know about, and nobody questions, did we get that right? Did we get Homer's Iliad and Odyssey right? Right? But they didn't get copies of some of these things for literally hundreds or 1,000 years after the originals were documented. But with the Gospels, they actually started making copies of the original texts within 25 to 50 years of when they were written. So there wasn't tens or thousands, hundreds or thousands of years after the originals were created that all of a sudden we have to rewrite these documents because they've been gone, right? They were written within a short period of time after the events, and then they were copied and duplicated and distributed within a short time after the originals were written. And the evidence for this is much more significant than other historical works that we don't question. Next question is, how did the information get passed down before it was actually written down? This, I think, is more common of an objection than the time frame, okay? People say, well, how could they possibly have gotten it right? And the most common objection that I've heard or been able to read about was the oral tradition just isn't accurate. It's just not any good. You can't pass along information accurately. And the biggest example that's used is the telephone game. Everybody here has at least heard of it or probably played it at some point in time. You say something. Do what? You love that game? You say something, and then by the end, something gets something completely different, right? Maybe on accident, like in this picture here, peas to bees to fleas, knees, cheese, whatever, they all sound the same. Someone didn't get it right. You only get one chance to say it, and then by the end, the story's completely off. Or sometimes people actually interject something in there. They say something intentionally wrong to mess with the story a little bit because it's going to be funny down the line or whatever the case may be. But we shouldn't judge the historical accuracy of books and just history in general, oral tradition, because of a game, right? Because of something that we know doesn't work. And I've got some examples of things that everybody takes and accepts that are passed down through oral tradition that nobody questions. So, for example, I mentioned Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Those were passed down through oral tradition and poems before they were actually written down. Atlantis, Bigfoot. Have you all heard of these things? How many people have heard of Bigfoot? Right? Chances are you heard about it before you read about it, if you've ever read about it at all. Camelot, Knights of the Round Table, The Fountain of Youth, Loch Ness Monster, Hercules, Medusa, Pegasus, Robin Hood, right? How many of you heard about Robin Hood? Right? Plenty of people. That was all oral tradition. Someone didn't write the story first and then they distributed copies of their book. It's been around for a long time, then someone decided to write it down. Other examples, customs, right? Blowing out candles at birthday parties. Only the bride wearing white at weddings. Fraternity and sorority traditions. Baby showers. Bachelor and bachelorette parties. Everybody's heard of these things, right? They know that they go on and you know it's supposed to happen. You know you can anticipate and expect that if you go to a birthday party and there's a cake, you just expect there's going to be candles and someone's going to blow them out. Why? How many of you all have ever read or been given instructions, had a class on how to perform a birthday party and that there's supposed to be candles that are supposed to be blown out by somebody, right? Well, I saw one hand. I want to hear about that, right? We hear about it, right? It gets passed down, but it's not something that we're taught. It's an oral tradition that gets carried forward. Superstitions are the ones that I think stick around a little bit more. And it fascinates me having children now because they tell me about some of these things that I grew up saying that I didn't teach them. I have no idea how my kids know don't step on a crack, right? Right? But you probably weren't taught that. You heard it, someone talked about it, but even though that's been around forever, everybody gets it right? Nobody says, step on a crack and, the microphone stand will fall over. That's not how it goes, and anybody could correct that. The oral tradition is faithfully passed down. So here's some other ones. Find a penny, pick it up, right? All day long you have good luck. A black cat crossing your path. Friday the 13th, seeing as a bad superstitious day. Crossing your fingers for good luck. That may cancel out the Friday the 13th thing. Turkey, wishbones, right? You break the wishbone. Whoever gets the bigger half is the one person that gets the luck. Knock on wood for good luck. There's birthday candles again. If you blow out all the candles, then your wish comes true, all right? Or wish upon a falling star. Disney may have invented that one, or maybe they stole it, all right? But all of you all have heard of these things, but I'm willing to bet that you all didn't read them, right? You didn't have to be taught. Someone told you about it. You inherited that knowledge through oral tradition. Here's some more. Songs and proverbs, right? For he's a jolly good fellow. That came from the 18th century. Jack and Jill, nursery rhyme, tied to King Louis. London Bridge. Everybody knows London Bridge, right? Everybody can recite it. That's actually from 1230 AD, right? Ring around the rosy. Or some proverbs, right? If anything can go wrong, it probably will. Actions speak louder than words. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Again, these aren't things that you are necessarily taught. We have an oral tradition class, and I need to teach you all this information. You have learned this because people have talked about it and passed on that knowledge to you, and you know it and can repeat it and carry that forward, right? But it's not changing. It's not the same as the telephone game. It doesn't get twisted. And here's some other examples that maybe you all can relate to a little bit more. How many songs can you recite from memory? Now, there's a bunch of music playing in here earlier, all right? Chances are, a lot of you all probably know all of them, right? Some songs that you haven't heard in a long time, you still know all the words to, right? Or about movie quotes. How many of you all know at least some movie quotes, word for word, right? The more challenging, I'm willing to bet some of you can do this too, is how many of you all could quote an entire movie? There's still a few hands. Now for my wife, it's The Little Mermaid and Aladdin, right? Princess Bride. For the guys, for the manly guys in here, it's Tombstone. And if you haven't seen it, watch it once, you'll be able to quote it, right? There's plenty of, that's 2 hours worth of content that a significant number of people can quote without actually putting that much effort into it, right? Here's some for me. Now, Alethea's back in the back, my sister. She probably recognizes these numbers. You all probably don't. The first one is a telephone number for our house. This is way back in the day before cell phones were around, right? There was no, let me just look at my contacts on my phone. If you wanted to be able to call somebody on their house phone, hopefully they had call waiting, because you could butt in, right? You had to remember the number. And if you didn't get it right, you didn't talk to whoever you wanted to talk to, right? And so there were all kinds of numbers that we had to remember. Your home number being one of the most important. Maybe mom and dad's work number, right? Maybe some of your friends' house number, right? If you had a girlfriend or boyfriend, you call them up. You have to know their number, right? Because we didn't have the cell phones when the contacts and, hey, call so-and-so, right? I can pick up my phone and say, hey, call mom and dad's least favorite, and it will call my sister. No problem, right? I don't have to know the number at all. I remember like 3 numbers right now, right? The other one is even more remarkable, because even though that other one is decades old, WFM 194, that's a license plate number. It's a license plate from my parents. They had a gray Subaru Legacy. Why that car? Because I'm getting old. Back in the day, pay at the pump wasn't a thing, right? You paid in cash inside. or you took the credit card inside, all right, and they laid it down this thing, and they had to slide this thing over it to make a carbon copy of it, and on that form that you had to sign saying, yes, I agree to pay for this gas, you had to put the license plate number in it, right? How many old people remember this, right? Right? And because I had to put that down so many times, I am never in my life going to forget that, no matter how hard I try, right? I haven't needed that information in decades, and I still remember it clearly without error. Now imagine you believe that God himself came down and told you something. Chances are something that is that significant in your life, you're going to be able to remember pretty clearly. I can remember useless information from decades ago, right? So we talked about when were the Gospels written? In a short period of time after the events actually happened, right? It's kind of like me remembering that telephone number and that kind of time frame, right? How did it get passed down? Oral tradition. Yes, it is easily possible to pass information along accurately. And something else that I was going to say before I move on, we kind of adapt. Humans are really, really good at adapting, right? And we don't necessarily remember all the numbers of everybody, gives us information. Right? Hey, I need your phone number for something. I need babysitting information. Put your number in here, right? If you tell me, I won't remember. Why won't I remember? Because I don't have to. Because now we live in an age where I can just put it in my phone and it'll recall it for me later, right? But if the only way for me to get a babysitter so that my wife and I can go on a date and have a break from our 3 kids is for me to remember the phone number, I'll remember, right? We have adapted, right? Back before all this information was readily available at our fingertips, you had to recall it, and we were good at it. So the last question is it trustworthy? If they were written within a short period of time, right, and that's not the reason why they wouldn't be trustworthy, right? And we know that oral tradition can faithfully, accurately carry on information until it's actually written down. Can you actually trust what was written down with the content that's in it, right? If you can buy that the Gospels are an accurate representation of what the authors said and meant, then can you believe it? So here's one assumption in that area. These events happened 2,000 years ago, right? We don't have enough documented evidence to back up the claims that are actually in the Gospels, right? That's not accurate either. This is the same chart, just expanded it over. I had hit a column of it earlier. And you can see some of these things that people generally don't question. Caesar, right? No one questions the existence of Caesar. Plato, right? Homer. I'm not going to try to pronounce the other names. And we had just a handful of manuscripts, right? Other documents that back up the claims of those documents that represent those stories, just a handful. Now the number here that I've got, which I'm pointing is not there, 24,000, right, is the number of manuscripts that are on this chart at this time, but this is a little outdated. It's actually somewhere between 50 and 60,000 now, right? The amount of evidence that backs up historically the claims of the gospel is overwhelming. It's not even close. It's absurd to question it. The other thing is, because it's a short time frame, right, the claims that are in the Gospels could be fact-checked. This morning we had some baptisms, right, in first service. And if I told all of you all, you'll never believe it. We had a baptism this morning, and when they walked out into the baptistry, they walked on the water. And everybody saw it. There were 300 people in the room, and every one of them saw it happen. What are you all going to do? You're going to go ask one of them, right? Was anybody there? Did you see it? Right? So if you had claims that, hey, this guy over here, this guy from Galilee, he's claiming to be God. These people over here, they saw him heal a blind man. They were all standing there. it would have been the easiest thing to go validate the claims in the Gospels. The other thing to think about, what would you be willing to die for? And not just any death. I'm not saying at some point in time, many years from now, sound like Braveheart, many years from now, laying in your bed, asleep peacefully, right, dying in your sleep. No. How many of you would be willing to be executed, capital punishment, publicly in the open square, crucified for a lie that you made up? Or for something that you weren't sure about? And when we're thinking about these early gospel writers, remember that none of them really stood by him at the crucifixion, right? It wasn't until after the resurrection when they saw him that they were like, I'll go to the ends of the earth. I'm willing to die for him. Because everybody ran away. Everybody abandoned him. Right? What would you be willing to die for? Also, the religious leaders and those in power at the time. So you've got, in a short amount of time, these men going out, telling stories, right? Writing books about claims from this man that you just executed. It wasn't a good thing for either the Roman Empire at that time or the Pharisees to have this happen. The easiest thing that they could have done if Jesus didn't rise from the dead and he didn't come out of the tomb was to produce the body. To shut it down on the spot. Right? Now let's just say for some reason that they couldn't do that. You still have these books being written. And these books that are saying, hey, he appeared alive to 5,000 people. All they would have had to have done, and they had complete power to do so, was send some people. Send some of the Pharisees. Send an investigative person to interview. And ask them, did you see it? They're saying you saw it. Did you see it? Did you see them? Did you see him alive? Did you see him healing these people? That would have been in their best interest. They just executed him based on his claims. And now they're saying he's alive. He's claiming to be God, and now he's back from the dead. Right? It would have been an easy thing for them to shut down if it weren't true. But it is true. There's plenty of evidence. We've started talking about it early on in the series with why we believe just in God in general, in creation here. And now we've come to the claims about Jesus Christ. Was he who he said he was? The one and only Son of God, the way, the truth, the life, the way to get to heaven, the way to get to God. Right? And the best source that we have for that early life and testimony is the Gospels. And this was a really high-level explanation of why you can trust the Gospels. But yes, you can trust the Gospels. You can trust that they were written accurately, recreated accurately and faithfully, and that they accurately represent the claims and life of Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm going to pray us out. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to come before you and learn and study about you and your grace and your love. And hope that we take this information and it just strengthens our foundation, that we make you the cornerstone of our lives and our faith. That any challenges that come up, we lay them at your feet. We have complete trust in you, and that we be there for each other, to support each other and love on each other as we go through this life together. Thank you for loving us enough to sacrifice yourself for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
All right, let's thank Andy for being here tonight. Like always, guys, I hope you appreciate this series that we're in right now, but also I hope you appreciate the dedication that we have with our eldership and other staff who are coming, because they want to pour into you. You know, it's easy for me to come up here week after week, and Steve to come up here week after week, and we tell you something about Jesus. We tell you something about the gospel because that's what we're here to do. YouTube, that's what we're here to do. Now, we're happy to do it because we're passionate about it, but it's also expected. It's not expected when these gentlemen come up here, but they're doing it because they want you to see how real this evidence really is. You know, when I think about what we talked about tonight, it still comes back to this same message. You have to choose, and you have to decide, do you believe this evidence or not? See, we're going to stack evidence upon evidence upon evidence upon evidence week after week. And it's a lot like your life. Your life is going to have things stacked upon it, on top of it, and on top of it, and on top of YouTube. It's going to have things stacked on top of it. But when it comes down to it, it comes down to a God who created this world that we try to stack everything on top of and say there's other things and there's other existence when it comes to that truth. Just like we try to do it with our own life. And I think when I want to fight God the most, and this is me being honest as your student minister, is when I don't want to face when there's a real problem. When I don't want to accept that something needs to change or something needs to happen. That's when I put up my resistance, and I don't want to trust the evidence that's there. You know, I had surgery this past week, and you know, the evidence of this is I'm walking with a cane right now, but the truth of it is that my body needs rest. Though I fought it the whole time because I want to be up, I want to be moving, I want to be hanging out with you all. There comes a point where I have to accept this is very clear what I need to be doing. But we put up that resistance because we like our own way so much. So I wonder tonight, what's your issue with evidence? What is still holding you back? And in fact, when you go to your small group leaders are going to ask you a question very similar to this. What is it that still holds you back? What are we missing? So much has been presented to you. What do you think we're still missing? What do you know about the lack of Jesus that we seem to be missing? And if your answer is, well, nothing, then my follow-up to you is, then why? Why would you still resist him? If so much is there, and so much has been poured out for you, why would you still choose to resist him? And you might be sitting here and say, you know, I do follow him. And that is awesome. You too, that's you. That's awesome. But I want you to be real with yourselves this week. If you are a Christ follower, if you are passionate for him, does that evidence, just as the same evidence that shines that shows that he is real, does that same evidence shine off of you? What about the people in this room who don't believe? Do they see it strong enough in you that it's real? Yeah, they see it on Andy and on Doc and on Steve and on Ben and on your small group leaders. What about you? Do they see Jesus on you? Do they see it in such a way like, man, that person loves Jesus? Is it shining that bright? If not, I think we all need to give ourselves a heart check because it should. When we walk outside these walls and we go to our schools and we go to our stores and we go anywhere we are, does Jesus shine off of us so bright and so powerfully that lives are being changed? And if the answer is no, and I think for most of us, there's an area, even if it's the smallest of area, you're just doing the best and greatest you can. I know you are. But there's got to be a little spot in there where we can all do better and see one more life changed. So I'm going to challenge you. Small group leaders, help them with this challenge when you do group time. I want you to be thinking of someone this week that you know they need this evidence. They are fighting it, they're resisting it. You love them and your heart breaks because they've chosen to either walk away from Jesus or they have chosen that they just don't believe. And that could be a family member, you too, it could be someone you know. Over the next 30 days, would you just commit to pray for them? Specifically, I know you pray and I know you have a prayer life, but over the next 30 days, would you keep them in mind? That the evidence of God will become so real in their life that at the end of this series, and the end of the going into June, or if it's going into camp, or even if it takes till we do back to school bash, that we're back in here or we're outside of where we are, and that person's standing right here holding one of these microphones, sharing a testimony of how the evidence of Christ changed their life, and it's because of what you did. That's my dream. That's my passion. And I know God is going to use you all to do it. But you have to be willing to be used. So there's your challenge. Will you accept it? Would you continue with us in this time of worship?
Darkness we were waiting without hope. act like I'm not. The one on the top, we been it before, you know what I did. I'm on my job, I'm doing my thing, I flex on you boys, I'll do it again. They said whatever, and I don't do talking, you lose your score. I'm going, get me started, you want